Kevin, so the announcement was made by Ryan Day on Tuesday. It's Kyle McCord. What I got out of that mostly, besides him making all the evaluations of consistency and so forth and poise and improvement, was Devin Brown will still get to play. So your thoughts about Ryan Day?
Yeah, I think this was an important move. You can't be dragging this on into the bulk of your season. This is your final quote unquote tune-up game prior to Notre Dame. I think you really need to have somebody getting the first team reps and like all of the first team reps. Things, mechanically maybe a little bit different where we know that it's not going to be a case of trying to get Devin Brown in the fourth series or the fifth series. I mean, certainly the plan is when the game permits to bring Devin Brown in, but Ohio State is going to have to be more effective on offense for that to be a case. Ohio State is not covered in either game, and while I would say neither game got particularly uncomfortable, Ohio State certainly didn't run away with either of these games. But I think we saw coming out of the Youngstown State game that Kyle McCord was the guy that Ryan Day wanted to have out there. I mean, most of they've been able to move the ball somewhat with him. I think that in the times that we've seen Devin Brown, we've seen kind of a muted offense to certain extents and things of that nature. I think it is it's a big move for the Buckeyes to have their starting quarterback, and I think it's one less distraction, one less thing to be talked about around the team as they're trying to advance through the month of September.
And Day even said as much when he said now the team knows for sure who their quarterback is and can move on and follow Kyle McCord's lead. And with McCord, I wrote about it today, this morning at BuckeyeHuddle.com, just the inefficiencies of the offense and how that is perhaps related to the quarterback competition. Guys not getting enough reps in practice, or not getting all of the first team reps in practice, but more so like during the games where you're pulling guys in and out, and how that can stall some momentum, or it keeps momentum from actually happening. Because right now, Ohio State is dead last in the Big Ten in red zone efficiency in terms of scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They've scored touchdowns on 3 of their 6 trips to the red zone. A year ago in September, 4 games in September, they failed just twice to score touchdowns in the red zone. They were 18 of 20. They've already failed more times in 2 games against 2 questionable opponents than they did all of September last year in terms of when they're in the red zone, they scored touchdowns. And so now going with one quarterback and not worrying about anything else, you would hope that stuff starts to improve. The third downs start to improve. The more that Kyle McCord sees these situations, the better he'll be able to handle them. So for as many reasons as everybody has already said and will continue to say, this was the right move. For one, it was the right guy based on what we've seen. I think everybody, if you left that Youngstown State saying, I think Devin Brown is the guy, nothing was going to change your mind, and nothing that you have seen on the field was ever going to change your mind, because your decision was made off the field by something somebody told you.
You're muted, Steve.
Yep, I'll throw in. I agree with everything these guys have said. I think the time was right to get this done and get it out of the way. I think that Kyle McCord came out in the first half last week, albeit against Youngstown State, and showed great command of the offense. He was very accurate, got the ball out to his receivers, let them create, has a special bond, it seems, with Marvin Harrison. But I don't think it's the point where he's going to force the ball into Marvin, to prove a point or anything. So I don't look at that as a negative thing at all that they played together in high school. But I do think that this was the time to whittle down the reps and make sure that McCord is getting most of them and get through this game against Western Kentucky, which in some regards could be a shootout, and then get into the Notre Dame game, which in some regards could also be a shootout. So I think that the passing offense is going to need to come to play these 2 weeks, and I think it's time to give McCord the best shot.
If the Western Kentucky game turns out to be a shootout, we're going to have a heck of a discussion here next week, I'm sure, and a more lively chat, I would think. But I will say this, Steve, and we'll go back around the horn, starting with you. Ryan Day made the comment about Devin Brown playing. Now, I don't know. He didn't elaborate necessarily if that means it's a blowout, Devin Brown's playing, or we have specific packages for him to play a la JJ McCarthy. And I doubt if Ryan Day is going to do that. Yeah, I saw the shake on Tony's response there.
Yeah.
And Devin Brown was supposed to be a much more athletic, very different type of quarterback. That's at least what the impression was for a lot of people, but I don't necessarily know if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't sense that they are committed to get him in on a certain series or anything like that, like they were conceivably the first two games. And it didn't work out in the first game because that was such a wonky game that he just shut it down and said, no, we need to get out of here with the win, and we'll screw around with the quarterback situation later on. And then last week, Brown did play, but, he was nowhere near as effective as McCord was. I'll get my response in here before my dogs go crazy, but I'll just say that I don't sense that there is any plan to play Devin Brown other than if the game gets out of control. And there shouldn't be. I think that it's for this week and next week, it's McCord's team. And then anything that happens in the future is an animal unto itself. But they are committed as of today to try and win the Western Kentucky and Notre Dame games with Kyle McCord taking all of the meaningful snaps. That's how I view it.
I thought we were working backwards back through the horn. So go ahead, Tony. Mute.
Sorry, I was trying to mute Steve's dogs. No, I would agree with Steve that, and Day said as much there, that it just, however, when he says like situations, how the situation comes about, and time and distance and all of these things, that just means as the typical backup quarterback would normally get reps and snaps, and we've seen what that means for Ohio State. That means that even if he does play, he's probably not going to throw the ball that much, and there will be no packages. And I know people have finally seen the differences in the athleticism between the two quarterbacks, and are coming to the realization that it's not all that. It's not a thing where one is so much different than the other that you can't do with Kyle McCord what you've tried to do with Devin Brown. And I think McCord has the athleticism to run some read option just enough to freeze the defense, and also has the willingness, as we saw, to run, to also pick up the chains and pick up third downs and move the chains and things like that. So I think he's more willing to run than CJ Stroud, so they can use him more than they would CJ Stroud. And also, as Ryan Day said, they're deeper at quarterback than they've been, so they can be a little bit more carefree with running the quarterback. They're not going to go JT Barrett on anything. But I think as effective as the running game has been with Devin Brown, I think it would be equally as effective with Kyle McCord, which is to say not all that effective on straight run calls.
Yeah, hear me out on this. How about you bring in Devin Brown as your third and short quarterback? Kind of back to the old Florida Chris Leak, Tim Tebow situation where you knew that you were going to have the one guy who could pick up that short yardage, and then you bring in the jump pass, because I think Devin Brown could probably do a little bit better than the Tim Tebow-esque jump pass. But yeah, I think that you have to just sit there and make sure that McCord is getting enough football. That had always been one of the situations that people got a little upset about with Ryan Day and his handling of the quarterbacks. You sit there and you get a younger quarterback in there, and, well, why aren't you pulling him? Well, he needs to play more football. Well, I think that Kyle McCord needs to play more football, but on the flip side, you've got to make sure that Devin Brown is engaged and getting enough opportunities out there. Well, not only for what next year could mean and beyond that, but as we saw on Monday night, stuff happens, and you need to make sure that these players are ready to go and are right and everything else. So yeah, I don't necessarily see anything that's, oh, well, we're only going to call these things for McCord, or we're only going to call these things for Brown. I think that when you sit there and you have things that are too specific and too tailor-made for quarterbacks that in large strides are not drastically different, is when you get yourself in trouble.
Kevin, people freaked out 2 years ago after 2 games. CJ Stroud played against better opponents. His numbers were better. His play was better. I would say he probably executed 80% of the time, if not more. He just made a couple critical mistakes or critical mistake against Oregon. Is there any way to make a comparison? I believe out there is the comparison that this is going to be just fine because CJ Stroud struggled the first 2 games, and that's what has happened to Kyle McCord. Or I think the other end of the spectrum is, the world's caving in. I don't know that Kyle McCord has performed quite to that degree. Do we have hope that he's going to reach anything close to Stroud?
I don't know if I like any spot on the spectrum that we're talking about right now, to be quite honest. Yeah,
That's not a good spectrum.
yes. I think that when you sit there and you look at the comparisons to CJ Stroud in year one, I mean, there were some differences. I think that Stroud's struggles were, he would come up short on some passes, or he would airmail some passes. It was not necessarily a case of where he was not making the throws. He just wasn't executing the throws. I think when I go and I watch Kyle McCord, I'm not sure if he trusts himself yet. I'm not sure if he trusts himself to make that second read or that third read. So I think there are some differences there, but I do draw the similarities of you're dealing with a quarterback who's not had a lot of experience. The game has to slow down at some point. And whether or not that is going to be at game 4 or game 3 or game 8, none of us necessarily know that for sure. Now, to the other side of the spectrum of the world is caving in and pets' heads are falling off and everything else. I think that you're always going to have that type of overreaction. I think it's been a case of just the lineage of Ohio State's quarterbacks here under Ryan Day, either as a head coach or as an offensive coordinator under Urban Meyer, that we've seen quarterbacks that have been 70+% in their completion percentages, and we've seen an offense last year that scored 44.2 points per game or something around there, and Ohio State now is scoring 29, I think it is 24. Yeah. So it's everything. I don't know if there's just one thing you can put your finger on and say, well, if they fix this, yes, if they fix the pass protection a little bit more and he feels a little more confident to maybe go through his progression, that would be great. Okay, maybe if they had, different play calling. I don't know necessarily what it is that is off, but sometimes it's like in basketball. If it looks like a foul, it probably is a foul. Well, I mean, something is a foul right now, and I don't necessarily know what it is. I just know something is.
I think it's interesting to me that I perceive any criticism of Kyle McCord right now as being less than the criticism CJ Stroud received after 2 games last year. And I think that is mainly because everybody has seen what's behind Kyle McCord when nobody had seen what was behind CJ Stroud. So you get the feeling that, well, Kyle McCord has to be better than CJ Stroud because CJ Stroud is terrible. He's not nearly as good as Dwayne Haskins or Justin Fields. So get him out of there. There's got to be somebody better. And now you've seen with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, it's hard to imagine that there's somebody better because you've seen both quarterbacks play, and I don't hear anybody clamoring for Lincoln Keenholz at this point. So I think for me, from just being around Twitter and the internet, and I'm not seeing too much of being the consternation or whatever. There's concern about the offense as a whole in terms of the line and everything. I don't think quarterback is the biggest issue at Ohio State right now with the offense at all. I think quarterback is going to be fine, and we'll find out more as we go here. But it's just interesting to me that the critics for CJ Stroud were very loud last year because the unknown is always better than the known. But right now we've got 2 knowns, and so you go with the better of the knowns.
I'm going to play stickler real quick before Steve goes, if he has anything left on this topic. So, Tony, you said the quarterback position is going to be fine. What's your definition of fine?
Well, and that's the thing. Fine at Ohio State means 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Fine for me would be competing to be or being the all Big Ten quarterback. And that's honestly, that is the standard at Ohio State for the last, since 2012. That's been the guy every year except for 2015. And that's it. I think that's it with Connor Cook. And that was the year that Ohio State was rotating quarterbacks. So that is the standard. And Ryan Day will tell you the standard is first round quarterback, Heisman candidate, that sort of thing. I think expecting a quarterback to be a top 4 or 5 quarterback all time at Ohio State every year is too high of a bar, because they did it with Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins, CJ Stroud, all top 4, top 5 quarterbacks in Ohio State history. To expect to hit that 4 times in a row, and maybe 5 times in a row if you throw a JT Barrett in there, I just think that's a lot. So I'm saying all Big Ten. I think Heisman candidate is not out of the realm of possibility in terms of being fine. All Big Ten is fine for this. Beyond that that's expectation, but there's a line between fine, very good, great, excellent.
Yeah, again, I'm in agreement with most of what these guys are saying. I think that this is the year where they don't win a championship in spite of the quarterback. They win a championship by supporting this quarterback with better play around them, and we haven't seen that from the offensive line. The offensive line has not played well enough to be considered a full support of the quarterback, of a quote young quarterback, even though he's in his 3rd year, at Ohio State, but just his 3rd or 4th meaningful game that he's ever really played in. So that to me is a major issue, and I think that is something that is going to come home to roost for this team at some point, whether or not they can make some kind of big leap on the offensive line and become a little bit more consistent. I mean, the first half last week, they had 3 penalties for 35 yards or something like that. And, you talk about, well, you don't convert on 3rd down. Well, you're not going to convert on 3rd down when it's 3rd and 12, So, I mean, that's not going to happen very often. But even when it's 3rd and 2, this offensive line has a problem converting it. So, to me, the issue with this team is not the quarterback. I'll agree with Kevin. I think that, we haven't seen McCord against, a top line defense yet. But my feeling is that he'll be fine, and if they lose games, it won't be because of him. It'll be because somebody didn't do what they were supposed to do on the offensive line, and it created a negative play that it was too hard for them to overcome, or it stymied a drive, or something like that.